about what the different organizations are in the cannabis space. We don't take a position about organizations because we can't vet them for you, and we encourage you to look at all of them, visit their websites, look at news stories about what they're doing, and make your own decisions about whether or not you want to participate in those organizations. So our next panelist is Andrea Richardson, and I'd like Andrea to start out by talking specifically about Prop 47 that I alluded to earlier, and then segue into talking a little bit about what the criminal penalties are currently for cannabis and how that impacts people of color.
Sorry. Hi. So thank you, Kendra, for that amazing overview of the current regulations for medical marijuana. I think that, so what I work on is criminal policy, specifically legislative advocacy, and I would like to talk a little bit about what the current state of what's legal and what's not legal in California is when it comes to marijuana, because I think that it can be a little bit easy in certain communities to feel like, well, we have access to marijuana, and it's it can be a little bit harder to see what's the fact that well, some people have access to it, some people are still in prison for it. Even if the Adult Use of Marijuana Act passes this November, some people will still be in prison for it. But I can start off talking about Prop 47, which is, I think, a pretty good, it's a law that passed in November 2014. It kind of marked the middle beginning, the end beginning, it marked a point of time in California. Starting to think a little bit differently about criminal laws. And so what it did, it took 7 low-level felonies and turned them into straight misdemeanors. And one of those felonies was just simple drug possession. So in California now, it's a misdemeanor to possess any drug, including marijuana, and including concentrated cannabis. So that's kind of the overview of what Prop 47 did. It is retroactive until 2017, which means that if you had any of these low-level felonies, the other felonies were theft crimes. So various theft crimes where the value is less than $950 is now a misdemeanor. And the retroactive part is if you have those old convictions on your record, you can apply to get them reduced to misdemeanors. That's supposed to sunset in 2017, but there's legislation right now to end the sunset. And I can't think of the number right now, but if you would really like to know the number, ask me afterwards and I can look it up for you. That's kind of just the broad overview of Prop 47. In terms of marijuana in California and what's legal, what's not legal, I think it can be helpful just to break down the state of the law in California. I don't know, hopefully that's helpful. So from starting, I think in 2011, you can possess up to 1 ounce of marijuana, and that's an infraction. So I think people were just getting really sick of prosecuting people for possessing what amounts to be a personal use of marijuana. So that's an infraction. Possession of more than 1 ounce, but basically not enough to be possession for sale, is a misdemeanor. Just like all other possession of all other drugs in California is a misdemeanor. Possession of concentrated cannabis is a misdemeanor. There are enhancements though for possession in certain places, like if you possess marijuana on school grounds, it can be a felony. Cultivating marijuana right now without a license, so without a medical marijuana license, is a felony. Possession for sale is a felony, and that's a pretty tricky one because it's basically does the cop feel like you're going to sell it? And that's a felony. Trafficking or transportation is a felony. And those are still very like active crimes. It's not like they're not being prosecuted. And I think it's important to think about when you think about 2016, and there are at least 2 legalization ballots that will be, or initiatives that will be on the ballot in November, and to think about, well, what is a crime right now, and if those ballots pass, what will be a crime, and how will those initiatives affect or impact kind of communities that have disproportionately felt the criminalization of marijuana. And so in like I think there are 2 big buckets there. So one is that under kind of the biggest initiative that will be on the ballot, the Adult Use of Marijuana Act, that's the one that has Sean Parker's many millions of dollars behind it. And I think he's only given like $1 million so far, but he has a lot of millions of dollars. And Drug Policy Alliance is supporting that one. I think NORML is, the NAACP has kind of like thrown their support behind it. There's like a lot of funny, politics stories behind that one. But it's important to keep in mind that that initiative, though it's drafted, there will still be a lot of things that will be crimes involving marijuana if that initiative passes, including selling without a license, selling to people who are under the age of 21, possessing on school grounds. It's your employer can still like prohibit you from smoking, not even just like while you're at work, but they can prohibit you like just from smoking in general. Yeah. Cultivating without, you can cultivate I think up to 6 plants. That won't be a crime, but you can. So you can possess. I think it's still up to I don't understand the metric system, so I don't know how much you can still possess a certain amount of marijuana now recreationally, and it will be a crime, or if that passes, it will be a crime. So that's kind of like one bucket of things that will still be a problem under that initiative, that there will still be things that are crimes involving marijuana, especially for people who aren't able to get a license to sell. And that's kind of the other bucket is licensing. And I think the drafters of this initiative really tried to do a good job in saying that you can't, so the licensing board can't deny a license only based on a previous conviction of possession or sale or transporting or cultivating any controlled substance. They can still consider those convictions, and they can deny people licenses based on criminal history. It just can't be based solely on that. It's the Department of Consumer Affairs is going to be the agency involved in licensing, and I think they've said, not like officially, but they've said that like this is an area where they really want licenses to be more available to people who have been directly impacted, but that's going to take a lot of advocacy on behalf of people like us to really like see that through, to make sure that legal marijuana doesn't just become an industry that's totally dominated by people who were not impacted by the drug war, or like by rich white men, basically. Yeah. So those are buckets. I think there are probably other buckets.
I'm going to ask you questions. So my first question to you is, can you talk a little bit about your work with lawyers, prisoners with children, and SC Justice Group in terms of what sort of support, because we're talking about business right now, but I also think it's important to think about the families that have been impacted and the needs of those communities, and hearing it from someone who works with them on a regular basis is a rare opportunity. So if you could just expand a little bit about what you're doing and what the asks are. I know they self-define with SC, but that's because I read your website.
Yeah, so that's a great question, and it makes me think of another bucket. which is so kind of like the area of justice reinvestment, which I think is very important to think about in terms of marijuana moving forward. There's going to be a lot of money generated in this industry, and how will that money be kind of put back into communities? So I bring that up because when you think about how drugs have been criminalized and how people have been impacted, right? So you get black people are just, I think, like almost 4 times as likely to be arrested for drugs. Black people are, it's just on every stage of the process. If you're black, you're like more likely to be arrested, prosecuted, convicted, get a longer sentence. Once you get out of jail or prison, you know, your conviction is more likely to keep you from getting a job, getting housing. So you're just like all sorts of fucked. And so it brings up a really, and this impacts, right, it impacts people who are incarcerated, it impacts formerly incarcerated people, it impacts those people's communities and families in a lot of ways in terms of just like, what's the emotional impact, what is the trauma that people are suffering, what are the educational opportunities, but there's also kind of this huge area of like, what are the financial costs to communities when you have just huge chunks of people are taken out of that community, put in prison or jail. They're not earning any money. They're not earning money for their communities. Their families are putting money into the system, you know, to just pay for the cost of fines and fees and attorneys and visiting. And so that's an area where I guess it was the question, like, how do you address that? I think there are a lot of ways to address that. One way is, you know, when you look at how will marijuana, when it's legalized in California, how will it be taxed? Where will that tax money be, or that tax revenue, how will it be kind of divvied up, and who is it going to go to? And again, I think that it's like, in this initiative language that has already been drafted, it can't be amended at this point, it can either be passed or not passed. It's a lot of money is still going to law enforcement.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Well, we need to pay money to like enforce this new law. Money is going to education. I think money is going to go into mental health and substance abuse programs. But what I don't see, and this language is money going into communities. And that's just, right, it's hard because it's like, that's a very politically hard thing to do. Like, we want like reparations.
And you're not
and
going to get
I think that is something though that without the voice of community members saying, hey, we're paying attention to this legislation, we're following the money, we know where it's going, we're not happy with where it's going, then it's not going to go to our communities, it's just going to go to police. And that's not what we want to happen. So I think it's hard because one of the big kind of gaps that I see in the like advocacy world is you have like this very like defined and powerful drug policy organizations where their agenda is really like, we just want to legalize this, and we're going to try to legalize it however we can. We're going to go the route that we think is going to pass. And there's not really a body holding them accountable to like, wait a minute. I mean,
except for us.
This is like the biggest opportunity, the biggest like economic opportunity, the biggest racial justice opportunity that our country's going to see in the criminal justice field in a really long time. And you don't really have like a core body of people saying these laws need to be like for racial justice, for economic justice, and this is what we want, and this is how they need to be passed. And I think that without that, it's just not going to happen. And one other thing that I wanted to add is that one thing about the Adult Use of Marijuana Act legislation that folks can start working on now is the way that initiative is written. It's basically just gonna like take over the medical marijuana board. They're the Bureau of Medical Marijuana, I don't know what it's called. It's this Medical Marijuana Regulation and Safety Act that was just passed last year created a medical marijuana safety Bureau of Medical, yes, that is what it created. So this is in place right now, and the AUMA is just, they said, you know, if it passes, they said, well, that bureau, that existing bureau will just become the, I think, like the Board of Marijuana Control. So it means that it will just adopt a lot of the like regulations and infrastructure that is being put in place right now. So that's like an area that can be worked on right now before this act passes.
Can I say something really quick? That's why I started my speech by saying we're not going to ask for anything. We are going to take it. If they aren't going to create the organizations to provide oversight, then we will create it. Do not be defeated by what's happening. Be empowered.
That is a wonderful transition to have Lenise talk about what she's been doing from the actual grassroots advocacy and consumer empowerment side of things. Lenise,
I'll start off with it just to make sure.
Hi everybody, Lenise again. I'll start off with a conversation I had with my uncle on the phone yesterday. He's out in New York. I was born and raised in New York. I grew up with him as my uncle, going in and out of jail. He was not too present in my cousin's life. So my father, like summers, weekends, my cousin's in the Bronx, bring him out to the island in Long Beach, going out. And we run around and have good times, It was just a good situation. Then I grew up, my uncle gets his life together. He's now out of jail consistently for 10 years. But where's his son? Where's my cousin? He's in jail for, the same shit. So I'm on the phone talking to my uncle yesterday, and once I'm getting home, yada yada yada, having a conversation. His spirits are up. He's gonna be cool. You know how we do. And I was saying, well, that's why I do what I do out here. Because when he gets out, I'm like, yo, cuz, come out to Cali or North Carolina or wherever it's at. I got a job for you. And that's what Cannabis Watch was formed. Cannabis Watch was formed by a body of Black and brown people that have been operating on the margins or the periphery of legalization for the last, since 1996 and before that. And we are intentionally collaborating to support each other's ventures. So we think about events like this, it's important that we have like the mental conversation, the mental stimulation, so that we can leave inspired. If you've been operating on the periphery and within the margins of legality since 1996 and before, Cannabis Watch is the space for you to actually do something. We don't talk theory there. We talk about how you got this, I got that. We talk business. We're not going to have an online presence because we talk business.
Right.
This is about moving shit forward.
Right.
Okay, so going on to moving shit forward, the Bay Area model is going to be the Bay Area is going to be a model in California, right?
Yep.
And then from there, California will be turned into its places model for the country, because even with us only having medical sales right now, we're still dominating states that have recreational sales. So we already know what it's about to be. So moving there, right now we're sitting in San Francisco, which is, I believe, Senate District, which one, 12? 19? Okay, it doesn't matter. So between San Francisco and combined over in Oakland, Alameda, which is State District 9, we have races happening in District 9, which covers Oakland, Alameda, Pinole, Hercules, San Leandro. And what I'm seeing is interesting to me because, how politicians work, how elected candidates work, they are going to prep for things that they need to be prepped for. So if there's no organizations like this asking them to have a debate, they are not going to prep for it. they are not going to educate themselves. And then this is the space to force candidates to educate themselves. So we have a primary on June 7th, and we have 3 candidates that if I went up to them and asked them about their stance on marijuana policy and legalization, they wouldn't have too much to say. And I say 2016 is no longer the space, is no longer okay for our candidates and our electeds to say their position on marijuana is for legalization. That's some bullshit. Today we need our candidates and our electeds to say, I support legalization and this is how new these means, and this is how we're going to protect Black and brown communities and give reparations. So, thank you. So what we need is, we need to be holding our electeds accountable. So we need 2 things. People who've been operating on the periphery, we need to get involved with Cannabis Watch. We are going to maintain a Facebook page so that you can find out like when we're meeting and stuff. But as far as like information and like details and all that stuff, no, we have to like, this is a grassroots member-based organization. So you're a member because you met another member and they told you about the work that we're doing to support their business and you want to get involved. This is Facebook and Twitter can only do so much, right? Another thing, we have MCLR, CCHI, AUMA. Andrea talked a little bit about those. From my perspective, I don't work on any organizations that have political connections, so I'm going to say something unpolitical.
Please.
AUMA is racist. Do not vote for that. Unfortunately, we are not sure if MCLR or CCHI will have enough funding to be able to qualify for in time to make the November ballot. And so if that happens, what we need to focus on as a community is defeating AUMA. And with
We have a
that,
rally on Tuesday.
excuse me?
There's a rally on Tuesday in Sacramento, no on AUMA.
Okay, thank you. No one AUMA rally Sacramento Tuesday. Lady in the back has more information. And also, not just know what AUMA when it comes to that, but we need to have skilled people who know electoral organizing. And so this is my offer to anyone in this room who wants to understand, well, we have a history of organizing in the cannabis industry of, it's not as tight as it could be. And what I can offer is my experience as a field director, as doing electoral organizing. I'm currently a field director for the Nancy Skinner campaign's Senate District 9. And as that, we have the primary coming up. I'm looking for interns, but I would love to use this opportunity to train up field organizers in the art of field so that we can use that weapon later so you can switch over for November so that you can actively be on the floor or on the ground, boots, no one AUMA. Because we need skilled people who are trained by skilled people like myself who can do this, because what CCHI have been doing and MCLR's been doing, I've heard, is there's good work, but it's not professional electoral organizing. And when you ask what's your target and your contact rate and your ID, and people are like, we're just getting signatures. That is not how you win something. So if you want to learn about actual identifying people, turning them out, and making sure that AUMA is stopped, sign up for an internship or come out, volunteer. I am on a campaign, so I have limited time. That's why I'm thinking, how can I, make 10 cents out of 5?
Right.
All right. And lastly, Cannabis Watch has an event coming up on 4/20. And if you keep in touch with Supernova, you will get the contacts for that. It's going to be in West Oakland in a backyard. It's starting off with it's fireside discussion, but really it's all about supporting local vendors. So if you are in this room tonight and you have your boutique products, whether that's your edibles, whether that's your cannabis oil, whether that's your soaps, whether that's your whatever, we have a place for you. We have a place to advertise for your stuff. Come together, come at me, find out how you can get your voice and your product and get love from the community on 4/20. 4/20 West Oakland from 6 to 10. Details will be coming later. I'm sure Supernova will share it with you.
Yeah, so
before we segue into having Daisy talk, we have a mailing list. If you will sign up for the mailing list, you will be receiving newsletters of upcoming events from us. We have the current upcoming event sheet over at the check-in table, but there's always new events that need to be added constantly. So for the most up-to-date information, sign up for our mailing list. Also on Facebook, you can find us at facebook.com/supernovawomen. And I know that we are running up into the question and answer portion. So let's have Daisy talk a little bit about her background and experience on the San Francisco Task Force, and then we're going to open up to general comment and questions, because I think that there's a lot that we need to talk about before the next panel.
Okay, so long story short, I am the vice chair for the legalization task force, as well as Sarah here, who works for Apothecarian. And what the task force is what we're supposed to do is advise the board of supervisors on issues regarding like land use, public safety, everything relating to cannabis. Like our task force is supposed to develop and then present to the board of supervisors so they can then implement it into city rules and regulations. So my role on the task force is honestly to really bring that bell of reparations and to really talk about how we need to really start bringing in that lens of equity and bringing in these different city departments to talk about how we're going to get the formerly incarcerated into that field, right? How we can actually start to bring up the conversations on hemp use and divesting from oil, having the city divest from oil and gas and things like that, bringing those conversations up, and also talking about health education in the sense that that's one of the things that the task force is mandated to, but how are they going to do it? Seeing as how most of the people that they want to target for this health education are going to be young people of color. So the ways in which, also because the AOMA designates a lot of like power into the local hands in terms of like where money's going to go and like licensing and things like that, I feel like it's really critical. My position right there is really critical in terms of how much money is going to be going into the police force and for what. Yes, because we know that policing is directly tied to gentrification.